You have probably eaten cow, pig, chicken, fish, maybe even something more exotic if you've traveled or gone looking for it. But have you ever eaten lion, wolf, tiger, bear? Almost certainly not. And it's not because you've never had the chance. The real answer is far stranger than you think. Somewhere along the way, your species drew an invisible line through the animal kingdom. On one side sat the animals you hunt and eat without hesitation. On the other sat the animals that hunt other animals. And something in you recoils at the idea of putting them on a plate. This isn't a rule anyone taught you directly. You never sat through a lesson called "Do not eat carnivores." And yet the instinct is almost universal, showing up across cultures that share almost nothing else in common. Why? Start with the simplest explanation, the one that has nothing to do with taste or squeamishness at all. It has to do with energy. Think about how strange this actually is, once you slow down and look at it. Humans have eaten almost everything imaginable throughout history. Insects, organ meats most modern eaters would refuse, fermented, rotted, and aged foods that sound closer to a dare than a dinner. Very few categories of food are treated as close to universally off-limits. Predator meat is one of the rare exceptions, and that alone should tell you something is going on beneath the surface. Every ecosystem on Earth runs on a strict energy budget. When a plant captures sunlight and turns it into leaves and stems, it locks away a certain amount of energy. When a rabbit eats that plant, it only manages to convert around 10% of that stored energy into rabbit tissue. The rest is lost as heat, movement, and waste. This is called trophic efficiency, and it was formally described by ecologist Raymond Lindemann in 1942 in research that became one of the founding papers of modern ecology. Lindemann showed that every time energy moves up one level in a food chain, from plant to herbivore to carnivore, roughly 90% of it simply disappears. Do the math on that, and something becomes obvious very quickly. A single acre of grassland might support thousands of pounds of grass. That grass might support a few hundred pounds of rabbits. Those rabbits might support only a few dozen pounds of wolf. By the time you reach the top of the food chain, there is almost nothing left to eat. Predators are rare, spread thin, and expensive to catch, in every sense of the word. Your ancestors were not stupid. If a herd of deer was standing in a field, easy to spot and relatively easy to bring down, why would anyone spend days tracking a single wolf through dangerous terrain, risking injury, for a fraction of the meat? This is optimal foraging theory in its most basic form. Hunt what gives you the most calories for the least risk. Predator meat almost never wins that equation. Consider what hunting a predator actually requires. A deer, when startled, runs. A wolf, when cornered, fights back with teeth built for exactly that purpose. A bear can kill the hunter as easily as the hunter might kill it. Every additional hour spent stalking a dangerous animal is an hour where the entire hunting party is exposed to injury, and a serious injury in a world without hospitals or antibiotics was often a death sentence on its own, regardless of whether the hunt succeeded. But scarcity and effort are only part of the story. There's a second, far more dangerous reason, and it has to do with what predators carry inside them. Picture the food chain as a series of filters. Each animal that eats another animal doesn't just absorb its nutrients, it also absorbs and concentrates whatever toxins, parasites, and contaminants were stored inside that prey. This is called biomagnification, and it means that the higher up the food chain you go, the more concentrated the risk becomes. A plant might carry a trace amount of a heavy metal. A herbivore that eats hundreds of plants carries more. A predator that eats dozens of herbivores over its lifetime carries the most concentrated dose of all. This isn't theoretical. It's why modern health guidelines tell you to limit how much shark, swordfish, and king mackerel you eat, because these ocean predators accumulate mercury at levels far higher than the fish beneath them on the food chain. Eat a top predator regularly, and you're essentially drinking a concentrated shot of everything toxic that ever passed through its prey. Then there's the parasite problem, and this one has a body count attached to it. In 1912, during the Australasian Antarctic expedition, a young Swiss scientist named Xavier Mertz died after he and his team ate the livers of their sled dogs to survive. Dog liver, like the liver of many carnivorous and omnivorous animals, contains an extraordinarily concentrated dose of vitamin A. In small amounts, vitamin A is essential. In the amount stored in a carnivore's liver, it's toxic enough to cause organ failure. Mertz's death is one of the most well-documented historical cases of hypervitaminosis A, and Arctic explorers had already learned, generations earlier, never to eat polar bear liver for exactly the same reason. Indigenous Arctic peoples had known this for centuries before European explorers ever arrived, and passed the warning down as a strict, unbreakable food rule. There's also Trichinella, a parasitic roundworm that causes trichinosis. It thrives specifically in the muscle tissue of carnivores and omnivores, animals like bears, wild boar, and walruses. Herbivores rarely carry it because the parasite needs a host that eats meat to complete its life cycle. Eat undercooked predator meat, and you risk a parasite that can migrate into your own muscle tissue, your heart, occasionally your brain. So predator meat is rare, hard to get, and biologically loaded with risk. But does that fully explain the gut-level disgust so many people feel at even the idea of it? Probably not. This is where psychologist Paul Rozin's research on disgust becomes useful. Rozin, who spent decades at the University of Pennsylvania studying the psychology of food rejection, found that disgust towards certain foods isn't just a learned cultural rule. It's often tied to a deep, almost automatic sense of contamination. Predators, in Rozin's framework, sit in a strange psychological category. They are dangerous. They are associated with death, blood, and violence in a way herbivores generally aren't. Eating an animal that itself eats meat can feel, to the human mind, like eating something one step closer to eating another predator, or even a human. There's a name for this pattern in anthropology, sometimes called the "you are what you eat" principle. Across cultures with almost no contact with one another, similar taboos emerge again and again. Carnivore meat is treated with suspicion, sometimes outright prohibition, tied to beliefs that the aggression, cunning, or wildness of the predator might somehow transfer to the person who eats it. Whether or not that belief holds any biological truth, it reveals something important. The taboo runs deeper than taste. It runs into identity itself. Rozin's later work went even further, showing that disgust isn't really about the physical properties of a food at all. It's about what that food represents. Show someone a perfectly clean, sterilized piece of meat and tell them it came from a wolf. And many people will hesitate, even flinch, even though nothing about the object in front of them has changed. The disgust lives in the idea, not the substance. That's a strange kind of power for a thought to have over a plate of food, and it suggests the taboo isn't really protecting you from a toxin at all, at least not directly. It's protecting a boundary in your mind, one that separates the eater from the eaten and the hunter from the hunted. And then there's the taste. Because even when predator meat is safe and available, it often just doesn't taste good. Carnivore muscle tissue tends to be leaner, tougher, and more acidic than herbivore muscle, partly because predators are almost constantly active, chasing, fighting, and defending territory, which builds up lactic acid and changes the texture of the meat. Their fat composition is different too, often carrying a strong, musky flavor from compounds related to their diet and territorial scent marking. Herbivore meat, built on a diet of plants converted efficiently into fat and protein, tends to be milder and more consistent. Thousands of years of selective breeding in cattle, pigs, and chickens only widen that gap further, optimizing herbivore meat for flavor while predator meat remained essentially untouched by that process. Even the animals themselves seem to sense this asymmetry. Herbivores can afford to be plump, calm, and well-marbled, since their food source, plants, is abundant and mostly harmless to digest. Predators live leaner and tenser lives by necessity, and their bodies show it. Every muscle exists for speed, ambush, or endurance, not for storing the kind of soft, evenly distributed fat that makes meat taste rich to a human palate. In a very real sense, the qualities that make a predator good at hunting are the same qualities that make it a poor meal. So the next time you sit down to a plate of beef, chicken, or pork, consider what you're actually looking at. Not a random cultural preference, not an arbitrary rule. You are looking at the product of an ancient, largely invisible calculation your ancestors made over hundreds of thousands of years, one weighing calories against danger, abundance against risk, and safety against toxin load. Herbivores won that calculation almost every time, and the meal on your plate is the quiet inheritance of that choice. There's something oddly comforting in that. Your dinner isn't just dinner. It's a decision made and remade by every generation before you, refined by trial, error, and the occasional catastrophic mistake, like a man in Antarctica who didn't know that a predator's liver could kill him. You will probably never face that choice yourself. You will never have to decide whether to risk a parasite, a toxin, or a dangerous hunt just to eat. But the instinct that steers you away from predator meat, the quiet recoil you feel at the thought of it, is still doing exactly the job it was built for. It's just that most of the danger disappeared long before you were born. You have probably eaten cow, pig, chicken, fish. You will probably never eat lion, wolf, tiger, or bear. And now you know it was never really a choice at all. It was written into the food chain long before you were born, refined by energy, danger, chemistry, and a boundary in the mind that keeps the eater safely on one side of the line and the hunter on the other. The more we learn about the past, the better we understand ourselves. If this video sparked your curiosity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Phoenix Primeval for more fascinating stories from history, science, and human evolution. Thanks for watching.